Lisa Carter sat in the big white room and felt very small. The room was huge and cold and made her think of a hospital where people went to die. Around her sat beings from different worlds, and they all looked down at humans like they were bugs, or children who did not know better. She had come here with hope, but that hope was dying fast. Captain Jake Morrison stood next to her chair, and his hands were tight fists. He wanted to hit something, but he knew that would make things worse. They had traveled for 3 months through space to get here and beg for help. Back home, millions of people were dying from a sickness that ate them from inside. The cure was here in this room with these alien beings, but they would not share it. The tall silver alien called Vextar spoke in a voice like breaking glass. He said humans were too stupid to use the medicine they needed. He said humans had never made anything good or useful for the galaxy. He said they should just accept that they were weak and let the strong species take care of important things. Dr. Susan Wells stepped forward with her small computer that showed pictures of dying children and empty cities. She tried to explain that humans would pay any price and share any discoveries they made. She spoke with a shaking voice because she knew her own daughter was dying back on Earth. While these creatures talked about humans like they were animals, the bug-like alien, called Zeke, made a sound like laughing, but worse. He said human science was like baby toys compared to what real species could do. He pointed out that humans still used fire to fly their ships, while other species had learned to bend space itself. He asked what humans could possibly teach beings who had traveled the stars for thousands of years. Lisa Carter had been Earth's voice to the galaxy for 8 years. She had smiled when they called humans primitive. She had nodded when they said humans were too young to understand real civilization. She had accepted insults and cruel jokes because Earth needed friends among the stars. But now, as she watched alien beings decide to let human children die, she felt something cold and hard growing in her chest. The vote was fast and cruel. Every alien in the room said no to helping humans. They did not even pretend to think about it. They acted like the question was asking them to waste time on something meaningless. Some of them made jokes about how long humans would last without help. Others bet on which human worlds would die first. Jake Morrison helped Lisa Carter walk back to their ship. The ESV Horizon was ugly compared to the smooth, beautiful ships of other species. It was made of metal and ceramics like a tool instead of art. The 30 humans on board prepared for the long trip home, knowing they would return with nothing but bad news. Amy Foster worked with the ship's radio systems, and she heard something she was not supposed to hear. The aliens were talking about humans dying like it was entertainment. They said it would be good to have fewer primitive species making noise in the galaxy. They laughed about human children crying for medicine that would never come. That night, as their ship moved slowly through space toward Earth, Lisa Carter sat alone in her small room. She wrote a message to President Richard Hayes and the people who protected Earth. The message was short, but it would change everything. She wrote that trying to be friends with these aliens was finished forever. Jake Morrison found her there, hours later, staring out at the stars. He asked what they would tell the families waiting at home. Lisa Carter turned to look at him, and her eyes were different now. They were cold and hard like metal. She said they would tell the truth about what the galaxy really thought of humans. Susan Wells worked through the night trying to find other options. She called every human scientist she knew and asked if there was any other way to save their people. The answer was always the same. The medicine they needed was too complex for human science. Without alien help, millions more would die. But something else was happening in the dark spaces between stars. Messages were flying between Earth and hidden places where humans built things the aliens had never seen. The galaxy thought humans were weak because they came from a young and simple world. The galaxy was about to learn that humans came from a world that tried to kill them every day, and that had made them very good at killing back. Amy Foster sent the recorded alien conversations to Earth, along with detailed files about every species that had laughed at human suffering. The information traveled through space ahead of their slow ship, carrying names and faces and the exact words each alien had used to describe human extinction as entertainment. Earth was listening, and Earth was learning, and Earth was beginning to plan something that would shock the galaxy into understanding what happened when you push the children of a death world too far. The aliens thought they had solved their human problem by saying no. Instead, they had created a much bigger problem that would soon be coming for them all. 6 months had passed since the aliens said no to helping humans, and 12 million people had died. But something strange was happening on Earth and in the space around it. Where once there had been peaceful research centers and trade stations, now there were military bases hidden in asteroids and weapons factories buried deep underground. Admiral Helen Brooks stood in a room carved out of solid rock beneath the mountains where she could see screens showing the biggest military project humans had ever built. President Hayes had ordered every resource moved from making life better to making war possible. The project had a simple name that made aliens nervous when they heard it whispered in dark corners of space stations. They called it Project Vengeance. Dr. Patricia Young had spent her whole life trying to heal people and make medicines that would save lives. Now she spent her days figuring out how to kill aliens as efficiently as possible. Her laboratory was full of weapons that broke every rule of safe science because humans had decided that safety was less important than revenge. She showed Admiral Brooks a video of tests they had done on captured alien equipment. Human weapons were crude and violent compared to the elegant energy systems aliens preferred. But crude and violent had advantages that elegant and safe did not. When human kinetic weapons hit alien shields, they did not bounce off or get absorbed. They punched straight through like bullets through paper. The aliens built their weapons to be efficient and clean and safe to operate. Humans built their weapons to kill things as dead as possible, even if the weapon destroyed itself in the process. Human plasma cannons ran so hot they melted their own barrels after a few shots. Human magnetic accelerators drew so much power they could explode if something went wrong. But they hit harder than anything aliens had ever seen. Colonel Danny Pierce walked through training centers where humans learned to fight in ways that would horrify civilized species. Mixed martial artists learned to kill in zero gravity. Deep-sea welders learned to work in radiation that would cook alien flesh. Oil rig workers learned to repair weapons while under enemy fire. Humans were taking every harsh skill they had learned on their death world and turning it into military advantage. The galaxy did not understand what made humans different. Other species had evolved on worlds where cooperation and intelligence were enough to survive. Humans had evolved on a world that tried to kill them with weather and animals and diseases and natural disasters. Every human was descended from millions of generations that had survived by being tougher and meaner and more stubborn than everything else on their planet. Captain Jennifer Martinez flew the first human military ships designed specifically for killing aliens. They were ugly and angular and covered in armor that made them look like flying fortresses. Alien ships were beautiful curved works of art that moved through space like dancers. Human ships moved through space like sledgehammers looking for things to break. Martinez explained the difference to her pilots in simple terms. Aliens built ships expecting to fight other civilized beings who would follow rules and try to minimize damage. Humans built ships expecting to fight for their lives against enemies who wanted to extinct them completely. When those two philosophies met in battle, the results would shock everyone except humans. Agent Kevin Ross had spent months sneaking through alien computer networks and listening to their private conversations. What he found was that the species ruling the galaxy had not fought a real war in hundreds of years. They had grown soft and comfortable and confident that their technology made them untouchable. They made their military plans assuming everyone would fight the same polite limited wars they were used to. Dr. Young's medical team had broken rules that aliens considered sacred. They had used human volunteers for drug tests that should have killed them. They had combined human bodies with machines in ways that violated every treaty about what was ethical. They had created enhanced soldiers who could survive in space without suits and operate in radiation levels that would kill normal humans in minutes. The first group of enhanced human operatives was led by Sergeant Lisa Johnson, and they had been through training that aliens would call torture, but humans called it preparation. Every enhanced soldier could fight in environments where aliens could not even survive long enough to die. They could hold their breath for an hour. They could see in total darkness. They could heal from wounds that would cripple other species. As reports came back to Earth about aliens making jokes about human extinction, President Hayes signed papers that officially changed humanity from a peaceful species trying to join galactic civilization to a military force preparing to tear that civilization apart. The papers had a simple title that would soon become famous across the galaxy. They called it the Human Defense Initiative, but everyone knew it was really about human offense. The prey animals were about to show the galaxy what happened when prey animals evolved intelligence and technology and unlimited anger. The comfortable, civilized species who had ruled space for thousands of years were about to meet the children of a world where only the strongest and smartest and most vicious creatures survived to have children of their own, deep and hidden bases throughout the solar system. Humans prepared weapons and ships and soldiers for a war the galaxy did not know was coming. They had been dismissed as primitive and weak and irrelevant. Soon they would show the galaxy exactly how primitive and weak and irrelevant a species from a death world could be when it decided to stop being civilized and start being what it really was. Underneath all the politeness and diplomacy, the galaxy had awakened something that had been sleeping in human DNA for millions of years. Something that remembered what it felt like to be the most dangerous predator on a planet full of things that wanted to kill it. Something that was about to remind the galaxy why intelligent persistence hunters were the most terrifying thing evolution had ever created. The Corvin mining facility on the distant planet had operated for 50 years without any problems. Insectoid supervisors watched automated machines strip valuable minerals from the ground while staying comfortable in their climate-controlled stations. They had chosen this location because it was far from human space, and humans were too primitive to travel such distances anyway. Commander Paul Jackson moved through the facility's air ducts with 19 other enhanced human operatives at 3 in the morning local time. Humans had evolved as hunters who could track prey for days without making a sound. Moving through alien buildings in complete silence was just another kind of hunting, and humans were very good at hunting. The attack took exactly 14 minutes from start to finish. Security cameras recorded everything, but by the time anyone could watch the recordings, all the Corvins were dead. The videos showed humans appearing out of nowhere like ghosts made of metal and death. They moved faster than Corvin eyes could follow, and their weapons cut through alien shields and armor, like those defenses were made of paper instead of advanced materials. Supervisor Zocht barely had time to send a panic signal before Sergeant Tony Williams broke down his door. The last message received by Corvin High Command was Zocht screaming that the humans were not trying to capture anything or anyone. They were just killing everything that moved and then taking whatever they wanted from the dead. The humans stripped the facility of its most valuable equipment and disappeared into hyperspace before any help could arrive. They left behind only corpses and a message burned into the main computer that made Corvin leaders feel cold fear in their multiple hearts. The message said this was payment for Colony 7 where human children had died, while Corvins laughed. 3 days later, a hegemony research station watching a dying star went completely silent. Investigation teams found the same evidence of swift, brutal efficiency with no survivors and no witnesses. Again, the message referenced a human colony that had been denied medical supplies while hegemony counselors made jokes about primitive species. Counselor Vextar called an emergency meeting of the Galactic Council, and for the first time in decades, his crystalline voice shook with something other than arrogance. He told the assembled aliens that humans were fighting wars in ways that violated every civilized rule of combat. They struck without warning and refused to accept surrender and left. No one alive to tell what had happened. General Jeekt H. presented military analysis that made the council members shift uncomfortably in their seats. Human weapons were designed purely for killing rather than subduing enemies. Human tactics showed no regard for the protocol of honorable combat that had governed galactic warfare for centuries. Humans fought like they expected their enemies to fight back with everything they had. The problem was that humans had never agreed to fight honorably. On Earth, war had always been about survival, and survival meant using every advantage and every weapon and every dirty trick that worked. The idea of fair fighting was something humans had never been able to afford when everything on their planet was trying to kill them. Agent Ross had built a network of informants throughout the galaxy, including members of species that had been conquered or enslaved by the major powers. These oppressed races fed information to human strike teams with deadly precision. Humans did not choose targets for military value but for symbolic impact. They attacked installations belonging to species that had voted against helping. HUMANITY Dr. Elizabeth Porter had created enhanced soldiers who could survive in the vacuum of space for short periods and operate in radiation fields that would cook normal flesh and adapt to gravity that would crush bones. These enhanced humans began appearing in places aliens considered absolutely impossible to reach and destroying targets the galaxy thought were completely safe. The third major attack hit a Threnody energy facility orbiting a white dwarf star. The Threnody existed as pure consciousness within energy fields and had never experienced physical death. When enhanced humans breached their facility using weapons that could disrupt energy patterns, the psychic screams of dying Threnody echoed across space in ways that sensitive aliens could feel in their nightmares. Captain Nancy Clark led the assault team and transmitted a message directly into the Threnody collective mind that made every energy being in the galaxy understand what humans meant by revenge. She told them they had called humans primitive and refused to help when human children were dying, and now they knew what death felt like when it came for beings who thought they were immortal. Within 2 weeks, merchant ships refused to travel through sectors where humans might be hiding. Insurance companies classified human-controlled space as a total loss zone where no cargo was valuable enough to risk encountering human raiders. Trade routes that had operated safely for centuries were abandoned, as captains decided that making money was not worth dying for. The galaxy began learning the difference between being civilized and being domesticated. The major species had been peaceful for so long they had forgotten how to be truly dangerous. They had built their entire civilization on the assumption that violence was something primitive species did before they learned better ways to solve problems. Humans had never learned better ways, because on Earth violence was often the only way to solve the problem of something trying to kill you. Human civilization was built on top of millions of years of successful violence, against everything from saber-toothed cats to ice ages to diseases that wiped out entire populations. Being dangerous was not something humans had grown out of. It was something they had gotten very good at. The comfortable species that ruled the galaxy were about to discover what happened when the most successful predators in known space decided to stop pretending to be civilized and start being what they really were. The age of polite diplomacy and limited warfare was ending, and the age of human fury was about to begin. Every species that had laughed at human suffering was about to learn why Earth was classified as a death world and why the things that survived on death worlds were not the kind of creatures you wanted to make angry. The largest military fleet in galactic history assembled at the edge of hegemony space like a metal storm cloud preparing to unleash destruction. 7 major species had contributed ships to create a force of over 3,000 vessels commanded by Supreme Admiral Krixvoll, who had never lost a battle in 200 years of service. Their mission was simple and final: find human space and destroy every human in the galaxy. Intelligence reports said humans had fewer than 200 military ships, and most of those were considered obsolete by galactic standards. The mathematical advantage seemed so overwhelming that some fleet commanders were already planning victory celebrations. They expected human resistance to collapse within days once the primitive Deathworlders saw what real military power looked like. Admiral Brooks monitored the approaching fleet from her hidden command center buried deep beneath the surface of Earth's moon. She watched thousands of elegant alien ships moving through space in perfect formation and smiled with the cold satisfaction of a predator that had successfully lured prey into a trap. The aliens were coming to fight the kind of war they understood. But humans were going to fight the kind of war humans were good at. The human defense strategy had been developed by General Alice Murphy and her staff using principles the galaxy had never encountered in civilized warfare: asymmetric tactics, scorched earth policies, the willingness to accept massive losses in exchange for strategic advantage. Most importantly, the understanding that sometimes winning meant being willing to destroy everything rather than let your enemy have it. Phase 1 began when the Coalition fleet reached the outer boundaries of human-controlled space. They found nothing waiting for them. No defensive installations, no patrol ships, no signs of military preparation. What they discovered instead were dead systems. Humanity had evacuated 47 star systems completely and destroyed everything of value before leaving behind only empty planets and automated weapons. Admiral Krixvoll, commanding from his flagship Eternal Glory, ordered his forces to advance toward the Sol system where Earth waited. His tactical computers calculated that the human homeworld would surrender rather than face complete annihilation. The computers had been programmed by species that had never fought humans, and they were completely wrong about how humans responded to threats. Captain Sandra Lewis commanded the stealth destroyer ESV Ghost and waited in the shadow of Jupiter, with 99 other human ships that had been hiding throughout the outer solar system for weeks. Their ships were powered down and invisible to alien sensors because humans had learned to be very good hiding from things that wanted to kill them. When the Coalition fleet reached Mars orbit, the trap was triggered with devastating precision. Humanity had spent months seeding the space around Earth with kinetic kill vehicles that were nothing more than chunks of dense metal accelerated to incredible speeds and programmed to home in on energy signatures. The first wave eliminated over 200 Coalition vessels before their commanders even understood they were under attack. Alien shields designed to stop energy weapons were useless against projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed. The second wave came from the human fleet itself as ships that had appeared defenseless suddenly activated weapon systems that violated every principle of safe energy management. Human plasma cannons operated at temperatures that should have melted their own hulls. Human magnetic acceleration weapons drew power directly from unshielded fusion reactors that could explode if something went wrong. But they hit harder than anything aliens had ever experienced. Commander Jason Rivers piloted the fighter ESV Wasp through the Coalition formation with his squadron targeting command vessels with suicidal precision. Human fighters were smaller and faster than alien craft and operated by pilots who had been trained to consider their own survival optional if completing the mission required sacrifice. They flew like humans had always fought, with total commitment and no regard for personal safety. Rivers transmitted to all human squadrons as his ship began glowing from atmospheric friction during a combat dive that should have been impossible. He told them to remember Colony 7 and Colony 12 and all the human children who had died while aliens laughed. He told them to make the galaxy pay for every human life that had been lost to alien cruelty and indifference. The Battle of Seoul lasted 18 hours and resulted in the destruction of nearly 60% of the coalition fleet. The aliens had expected easy victory over primitive humans and instead found themselves fighting the most vicious and determined enemy they had ever encountered. Human ships rammed alien vessels when their weapons failed. Human fighters continued, attacking even when their life support systems were destroyed. Humans fought like their entire species would die if they lost, and that made them willing to do things civilized beings would never consider. But the cost to humanity was terrible. Only 37 human vessels survived the engagement, and Earth itself was badly damaged by orbital bombardment that killed millions of civilians. The human victory was bought with blood and sacrifice on a scale that shocked even the humans who had planned it. But they had proven something important to the galaxy. Humans would rather die fighting than live as slaves or accept extinction quietly. Admiral Crixvel sent a message to the Galactic Council from his crippled flagship as the remains of his fleet retreated from human space. He told them that humans did not fight like any species the galaxy had encountered before. They seemed to welcome death if it meant destroying their enemies. He strongly recommended immediate negotiation before humans decided to carry their war to alien homeworlds. The Council's response was swift and uncompromising. They rejected any possibility of negotiation and ordered preparation for Phase 2 of the human extermination campaign. They had committed too much to this war to back down now, and they refused to believe that primitive Deathworlders could ultimately defeat the combined might of galactic civilization. The Council members did not know that humanity had already moved to Phase 3 of their own plan, and that Phase 3 involved taking the war directly to every alien world that had voted for human extinction. The galaxy was about to learn what total war meant when practiced by a species that had evolved by being better at killing than everything else on their planet. President Hayes stood in the smoking ruins of New Geneva and spoke to humanity through emergency broadcasts that reached every surviving human settlement across the galaxy. Behind him, the city burned from Corvin orbital bombardment, but his voice carried the cold fury of a species that had been pushed beyond its breaking point. Millions of humans had died in the Battle of Seoul, but those deaths had only made the survivors more determined to finish what the aliens had started. He told the human race that the galaxy wanted to exterminate them completely and had made their choice clear through overwhelming military action. Now humanity would make their choice equally clear. Executive Order 3157 suspended all international law and all ethical constraints on military research and all limitations on acceptable casualties in the prosecution of total war against alien civilization. Dr. Young's weapons division had been developing projects that would have horrified the galaxy's civilized species even before the war began. Self-replicating war machines that could consume asteroid fields and convert raw materials into autonomous weapons platforms. The locust swarms began spreading through uninhabited systems, creating vast armies of machines whose only purpose was destroying alien ships and installations. Agent Ross had made contact with oppressed client species throughout the galaxy who had been conquered or economically dominated by the major powers for centuries. To them he offered a simple proposition that would change the balance of galactic power forever. Help humanity win this war and earn your freedom in the aftermath. Refuse and face the same extinction the major species had planned for humanity. Response was immediate and devastating to alien stability. The Skarn warrior race launched simultaneous uprisings across 50 Corvin-controlled worlds. The aquatic Veltar began sabotaging hegemony mining operations from within their underwater facilities. Dozens of client species chose to risk extinction for a chance at independence under human protection. Captain Rodriguez commanded the ESV Fury and led humanity's new deep strike capability built around ships equipped with singularity weapons that could collapse entire star systems if necessary. The psychological impact was more devastating than the physical destruction. Alien populations began evacuating systems based on rumors of human presence because nobody wanted to find out what humans would do to planets that resisted. The Threnody attempted to negotiate by offering to restore the human colonies. They had refused to help during the plague crisis. The response came directly from Admiral Brooks and was broadcast across the galaxy so every species could hear it clearly. She told them it was too late for mercy and they had missed their chance to be civilized when they chose to let human children die for their entertainment. General Murphy had identified the critical weakness in galactic civilization that would allow humanity to achieve total victory, despite being vastly outnumbered. The galaxy's entire culture was built on the assumption that warfare was a limited, controllable activity conducted according to established rules between civilized opponents. They had never faced an enemy willing to destroy everything rather than accept defeat. The war entered its most brutal phase when humanity deployed the Genesis Protocol, which used terraforming weapons to convert entire alien worlds into environments toxic to their current inhabitants but suitable for human colonization. Unlike traditional conquest, this was permanent species displacement designed to claim living space for humanity's expanding population. The first world to be Genesis formed was the Hegemony Capital's primary moon, which housed 12 billion civilian inhabitants in vast underground cities. Within 72 hours, the atmosphere had been converted to an oxygen-nitrogen mixture laced with compounds that were lethal to hegemony physiology but harmless to humans. The entire population died in their sleep while human colonists prepared to take possession of their new home. Counselor Vexstar's final transmission before evacuating was broadcast across the galaxy as a warning to other species about what they had created through their arrogance and cruelty. He said they had made this monster by refusing to help humans when help was possible. Now humans did not want to rule alien species. They wanted to replace alien species entirely with human colonies. The galaxy's unified response began crumbling as individual species started making separate peace negotiations with humanity. The Corvin Empire recalled their fleets to defend core worlds against simultaneous rebellions and human attacks. The Threnody began abandoning physical space entirely and retreating to energy dimensions humans could not follow but also could not be threatened from. But Admiral Brooks had learned important lessons from humanity's first diplomatic mission to the Galactic Council years earlier. When alien delegates came to negotiate, they found Earth's terms were non-negotiable and designed to ensure humans would never again be vulnerable to galactic persecution. Complete technological transfer. Massive reparations for every human life lost. Permanent human seats on the Galactic Council with veto power over all decisions. She told the assembled alien diplomats that they had taught humanity that might makes right, and that civilized negotiation was a luxury only powerful species could afford. She congratulated them on being very effective teachers because humans were proving to be excellent students in the application of overwhelming force to achieve political objectives. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when the apex predator species of a death world gained access to the industrial resources and technological capabilities of an entire galactic civilization. Humanity had been content to remain a minor species asking for help and friendship. The galaxy had chosen to make them into conquerors instead. Every species that had voted against helping humans during the plague crisis now faced the choice between submission and extinction. The comfortable civilized races that had ruled space for millennia were discovering that evolution on a death world produced more than just survivors. It produced the kind of beings that became dominant whenever survival became more important. Then civilization. The age of human expansion across the galaxy had begun, and it would continue until every species understood that the children of Earth were no longer asking for acceptance. They were taking what they needed and eliminating anyone who stood in their way. 5 years after the first human colony ship had left Earth to beg for medical help, Ambassador Carter sat in the same pristine white chambers where humanity had once been dismissed as irrelevant. The room looked identical, but everything else had changed in ways that would have been impossible to imagine when humans were still asking politely for assistance from their galactic neighbors. The Galactic Council now consisted of 37 species, but 12 of those were client races that owed their independence to human military intervention during the war. The major powers that had once dominated galactic politics through wealth and technology found themselves outnumbered and outmaneuvered in every vote as their former subjects sided consistently with their human liberators. Counselor Vex Tar presented the hegemony's quarterly compliance report with visible distaste and barely concealed fear. His crystalline form had lost much of its previous luster, and his voice no longer carried the arrogant confidence that had characterized hegemony dealings with lesser species. The terraforming of Kepler 442b was proceeding according to human specifications and hegemony. Industrial capacity had been converted to producing medical supplies for human colonies as required by the surrender agreements. General Murphy now served as Earth's military liaison to the Council and accepted the report without comment or acknowledgement. The former mining world, where Corvin supervisors had once dismissed human suffering, was now a thriving human colony called New Hope, where children played in parks built on land that had been strip-mined by alien corporations for decades. The galaxy had been forced to adapt to humanity's approach to civilization, which differed fundamentally from every other species in known space. While aliens built efficient, sustainable societies designed to last for millennia, humans created redundant, over-engineered systems designed to survive any catastrophe or attack. Human colonies were fortress worlds. Human ships were mobile weapons platforms. Human diplomacy was backed by the implicit threat of total annihilation. Dr. Porter's enhanced human program had evolved into something that amazed even its creators. A new generation of humans adapted for life in the galaxy's most hostile environments had established thriving colonies in radiation-soaked systems and on worlds with crushing gravity and in the vacuum of space itself. Places where other species could not survive had become exclusively human territory, expanding the scope of human-controlled space far beyond what anyone had thought possible. Captain Martinez had been promoted to admiral and now commanded humanity's exploration fleets as they pushed into previously unmapped regions of the galaxy. Human ships remained ugly and utilitarian compared to the elegant designs favored by alien engineers, but they consistently outperformed their competition because they were built by people who assumed everything would eventually break down under combat conditions. The economic transformation had been equally dramatic and one-sided. Human corporations operating under looser ethical constraints than their alien competitors dominated emerging markets through aggressive expansion and their willingness to operate in dangerous sectors that civilized species avoided. The galaxy's comfortable, risk-averse businesses found themselves unable to compete with humans who treated mortal danger as an acceptable business expense. Agent Ross now served as Director of Human Intelligence Services and maintained information networks throughout the galaxy that ensured no species could coordinate military action against humanity without humans knowing about it immediately. The client races provided intelligence while fear of human retaliation ensured compliance from former major powers, who had learned painful lessons about the consequences of opposing Earth. Perhaps the most significant change was philosophical rather than political or military. The galaxy species had spent thousands of years believing that civilization meant the elimination of violence and competition and struggle from daily life. Humanity had proven that these forces, when properly channeled, were the engines of progress and adaptation that drove species to greatness. President Hayes addressed the Council on the 5th anniversary of the war's end and summarized humanity's position in terms that every species present understood perfectly. He told them they had treated humans as primitive because they came from a dangerous world, but they had been wrong about what that meant. Humans were not primitive. They were prepared for anything the galaxy could do to them. The younger generation of aliens growing up in humanity's shadow began adopting human approaches to problem solving and conflict resolution. They exercised regularly to build physical strength. They studied martial arts and competitive sports. They embraced individual achievement rather than collective harmony. The galaxy was becoming more human with each passing year as alien youth recognized which traits led to success in the new order. Dr. Young's research division had moved beyond weapons development to focus on projects that terrified the galaxy's established powers. Faster-than-light communication systems that did not rely on alien-controlled infrastructure. Self-sufficient. Manufacturing that could produce any technology from raw materials. Most frightening of all, genetic modification programs designed to help other species adapt to humanity's aggressive pace of expansion and colonization. The Threnody had initially believed their energy-based existence made them immune to human influence. They discovered otherwise when human scientists developed ways to interact directly with energy-based life forms, not to destroy them but to offer partnership in exploring dimensions that purely physical beings could not access. Even beings of pure consciousness found humans useful allies when properly motivated. Ambassador Carter concluded humanity's annual report to the Council by looking around the chamber at representatives of species that had once considered her people insignificant newcomers to galactic civilization. Some showed fear. Others displayed resentment. But all of them showed the respect that came from understanding exactly what humans were capable of. When sufficiently motivated, she observed that the galaxy remained a dangerous place full of unknown threats and hostile environments and species that might someday challenge human expansion. She noted that it was fortunate for everyone that the most dangerous species in known space had chosen to be civilized and diplomatic in their approach to galactic politics. For now, the implications of her words hung in the chamber's recycled air like a permanent threat. Humanity had proven that evolution on a death world produced more than just survivors. It produced conquerors who could adapt to any environment and overcome any obstacle and eliminate any enemy that threatened their continued expansion across the stars. The galaxy had wanted humans to remain quiet and insignificant and grateful for whatever scraps of assistance more advanced species chose to provide. Instead, humanity's fury had shocked the galaxy into a new age where the apex predators of Earth had become the apex predators of space itself, and every other species could either adapt to that reality or face the same extinction they had once planned for humanity.